introduce our guest. So this is Adam. He is a museum curator and a public historian. He has an MA in Viking and Medieval Norse Studies and an MLIS in Cultural Heritage, and is published on history, communication, and on the reception of the Vikings. Online, he focuses on historical games and media on his channel Ludo History, and he also consulted for a history-focused YouTube channel, including Overly Sarcastic Productions and Jake W. And I hope I pronounced that right, because I was thinking about what that meant.
Nope, absolutely correct. So yes, it's for all the folks over at Melissa's channel who I have not met yet. It's so good to meet all of you. To all of my folks, it's good to see so many of you hanging out. You should all make sure you also go follow Melissa because it's very cool. There's lots of very fun stuff.
And you should make sure you follow Ludo History for anyone on the other side as well.
Yeah. All right. So, my background is in Vikings, but these days I unfortunately mostly get stuck into doing 20th century stuff, which means I have gotten very good at learning a little bit about everything. And so today, I'm going to be talking to you all about a classic feature of historical games that I think, by and large, is done quite badly. So, fixing the historical games Codex. Let's get going. So, the historical Codex has been a staple of video games set in a historical past since at least 1991. Since the introduction of the Civilopedia in the original Sid Meier Civilization.
Oh, so
it may go even farther back. I have not been able to find definitive things. We get much farther than back. They don't have the file size in order to really have large text entries. Unfortunately, a lot of these features, especially the Civilopedia, are kind of trash. Like, they don't have to be, though. And so we're going to go through what's wrong with them, and how do we fix it? So, to first off tell you a little bit about who am I to judge, because making video games is extremely hard, and I am not a games creator. But what I am is a museum curator. My specialization, my day job, is writing text to create historical experiences that resonate with people. I've also been on Twitch for 5 years at this point, which is really quite bonkers to say, playing historical games, and pseudo-historical games, so some historical fantasy, some things that just, I feel like it, but mostly historical games across all time settings, across anything from the largest AAA games down to the smallest, like two people worked on this indie games. And I have been published in 2 academic articles. You can find me without too much searching IRL on historical games, both from theoretical perspectives and sort of the discursive approach to creating historical media and through practical case studies. So, let's start by defining what the heck we're talking about. I identify, broadly speaking, 4 main variations on the historical codex. Because on a high level, this is really any supplemental material incorporated into a game whose primary goal is educating people about the real world. Right?
Yep.
This can take a lot of different forms, though. So, type 1 is the Civilopedia. Type 2 are these discoverable entries that will unlock through play. Type 3 are things that appear in tooltips. And type 4 is a little bit fuzzier of a category, but ones with a strong meta component. The Civilopedia, we know it, we probably don't love it, but it unlocks from the moment you hit New Game. You're able to look up every single entry on this. You might have sections on gameplay tutorials upon different factions you're going to be playing, but in Civilization's case, you also get city districts, building types, consumables if you're playing Civ 7, wonders, leaders. All of these different things get entries with a lovely section that says historical background and then gives you 200-ish words of extra information. These are intended, of course, not to be read cover to cover. Like, no one in their right mind is going through and just reading the Civilopedia. These are intended as a reference document because, as the name implies, their inspiration in the real world is an encyclopedia, or more accurately these days, Wikipedia.
Yeah.
So these text blocks that are intended as references, you're curious about something, you look it up, you read one entry, you go back into the game, or you can chase a rabbit hole with some cross-linking. So the clear examples of this are in Civilization and Age of Empires, especially Age of Empires 2 and 3. But we do see this showing up somewhat regularly throughout all sorts of stuff. Type 2 is the discoverable codex. If you play Assassin's Creed, you know what, like, Assassin's Creed Shadows is rife with the dang thing. So, in short, this is, you do a thing, you see a thing, you unlock an entry about the thing. This may be something that is literally visible within the game's map as a collectible that you are really encouraged to collect. Assassin's Creed Mirage did that. It doesn't have to be, though. In Kingdom Come Deliverance 2, you will unlock entries about stuff by either seeing a specific thing in the landscape as through kind of organic discovery, or through specific player actions. So after you unlock the Meisterhau, you're going to unlock a codex entry about longsword fencing. These are often intended for immediate access. Kind of a really key feature of these is when you see it, there will be a pop-up in the UI with a press this button in order to read it right now. If you miss that, if you take too long, like I do every single time, you then have to go into a menu in order to go actually read the thing.
Or you accidentally click it like I do all the time.
True.
Because
You're like, I didn't care about this, but we're doing this anyway.
That happened to me way too much in the early, I think, Assassin's Creed 2. I kept accidentally clicking the button. I was like, no, I don't care. I want to keep going. I'll look back later.
Yep. Notice in modern Assassin's Creed, you have to actually hold the button, unlike in Assassin's Creed 2.
That's very, very helpful.
Yep. Type 3 is the tooltip. These are very short, very minimal pop-ups triggered by hovering over a highlighted word in the UI. These are intended to not disrupt the gameplay experience hardly at all. You're curious about something, you hover over it, it tells you what you need, and you are out of the way. So our core examples of this are, of course, Crusader Kings 3 or any Paradox interactive game, which is just has so many tooltips, which often are very tutorializing, very gameplay focused, but then you'll have like a sentence of historical information as well, or our beloved Pentiment. The last type here is a little bit odd. This is the meta entry. It may behave a lot like the discoverable one, but it has one really important difference. There are NPCs within the fiction of the game who are providing additional commentary or flavor or critique of the information being presented. And the thing that makes this so different from the discoverable ones is that the discoverable ones really are intended to be education focused and stay very isolated. Like, they're related to the game world in that there is some specific action or scene that caused you to get this, but the information in it is intended to stand alone. In the meta one, that's not the case. And so we have, my favorite example of this is Assassin's Creed 4 Black Flag, where you have fictional narrative designer Darby talking about how the facade of a church is not done yet, but players expect it, and therefore we need it to happen. And so you're getting fictional developers telling us about what the real developer's thought process was while they're doing it in a way that kind of lampshades the meta plot and all of the ISU kind of conspiracy theory stuff that circulates in the background of Assassin's Creed. So you'll get people talking about Abstergo as like an entity that has agency in the creation of the game, even though Abstergo doesn't exist and was not responsible for writing those codex entries.
Yeah. That's funny.
And that blurring is so significant that even though mechanically these often look a lot like the discoverable ones, especially, this is worth turning into its own category. So, what makes all of these similar? They've got a lot of the similar goals. The first one, and probably the most important one, is that we're really trying to educate players about the history outside of the world of the game. Game devs have absolutely realized that there is some subset of their audience that is trying to learn history through these games, and through increasingly elaborate and increasingly sometimes harebrained schemes, they're trying to incorporate those educational elements more deliberately and more thoughtfully than they did 30 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
These are also intended to provide a sense of discovery and wonder. Oftentimes, you see something, you're like, that's cool. And then you learn a little bit more about that, and you're like, that's so cool. That's way cooler than I thought it was. And these Codex entries are a great way to do that. They also can let the players peek behind the curtain on the research and development process.
Mm-hmm.
But really what that's intended to do is, of course, increase the authority of the dev team. By being careful and saying, in our game, we made XYZ choices, and being strategic about when they say that through the Codex, it makes the dev team, makes everything seem like it was well-researched and intentional, and it increases the authority and the trust players have in the dev team in creating the simulation. So even though the information in the Codex might literally contradict what you're seeing in the game world, you can still increase, by lampshading that, it actually increases the authority and increases the immersion of the experience. And lastly, most of the time, it's intended to harmonize real-world history to the conceit, to the fictions of the game, even when there is shorthand being used, even when there are concessions being made. We're still overall trying to make the game feel like it is a part of history rather than a historical fiction.
I was weirdly gonna ask that because it in a weird way, like, especially in a lot of the Assassin's Creed games that do follow real life events, I was thinking about how it's like that is a secondary version of the Codex, even if technically they make some very like incorrect changes to the history. It is like you are seeing the assassination of Julius Caesar from that perspective, but that is also part of the Codex, even though it's actually the gameplay itself, which I love.
Absolutely. I for the purposes of this, I'm going to separate those two into two far more cleanly separated things than they actually are, because otherwise we'd just be talking about everything forever, and that's
Forever.
At some point, we do have to draw boundaries to be able to create a functional talk. But you're absolutely right that the Codex is not the only, and in fact, not even the primary way that games do history. Right? These are intended to really, think about, the world and the research, and draw back from the simulation, draw back from the narrative, in order to be more explicit about the history and more clear about what is fictional, what is historical within these games. And that's something that mini games, loading screens, NPC dialogue, and narrative quest design all struggles to do. Like, it doesn't have that pullback, even though it is all very much doing history.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, very, very much so.
Yeah, so there are some problems with them. As much as I, love them, I think there's a lot of them that are very good. There's some that have problems. So let me run this clip, and hopefully this runs smoothly. And shouts to PowerPoint for not always letting that be the case.
Yep.
So this was during Assassin's Creed Shadows about a month and a half ago.
Okay.
So, what are some of the things that went wrong here?
Mm-hmm.
Firstly, I want to highlight up here in this corner, what's our goal? Meet Tokugawa. Now, anyone who knows anything about the Sengoku Jidai in Japanese history knows that this is Tokugawa Ieyasu, the man who will eventually become the first shogun or the first shogun of the Tokugawa shogunate, and the first de facto ruler of the Edo period.
Mm-hmm.
That is an incredibly important figure, and the fact that we have been since our hideout for 1,000 meters of game space, been like, we're about to meet Tokugawa Ieyasu. We haven't met him yet in the narrative. This is so cool. This is so cool. My brain's focused on that.
Yeah.
My brain is not focused on tea production. And
No.
secondly, we are 100 meters away from our destination. We are in the zone. We get to the top of the hill. There's a neat thing. There is a battle going on. Sorry, we are actively in the middle of Tokugawa's forces fighting off a band of assassins. Assassins not as in assassins. Assassins,
not the
assassins. Yeah.
Not the assassins.
Exactly.
Assassin. Yes.
A group of shinobi who were sent there to kill Tokugawa Ieyasu. And so we actually are about to have a fight. We're about to be doing the only verbs the game has, i.e. stabbing people. It is in fact the primary verb that Assassin's Creed has in its pocket. So, in two different ways, both from a high-level narrative design and in a second-to-second player experience, the tea production in Uchiwara, as lovely of a Codex entry as it is, and as nice as it is to see tea fields rendered within the landscape, I'm sorry, I don't care.
Yeah, not the most important.
At that moment, at that time, I was like, ooh, neat. Anyway, and then we have this, lovely, incredibly detailed entry on the introduction of tea from China to Japan, and in fact, this is one of the central tea production regions in the Kansai region. Really, really cool thing. Really lovely that they're including it. But they mistimed it, and so it took me hours and hours before I went back, and it has stuck in my memory as a case of, I'm sorry, you thought that was important to me now?
Yeah.
So they fundamentally just mismanaged player attention, and that hurts the primary goal of being educational.
Exactly, yeah.
It just completely falls down on a simple level. It's just a good entry in the wrong place at the wrong time.
Yeah.
Now, it is possible, of course, to come across this when you are not about to do it, but this is probably the first time most players are going through that part of the game map, and it is on the only real road from the hideout to this location. So most likely, and this was probably done on purpose, most likely you are sort of expected to pass through it in this area, and it's right on the road so that you don't accidentally miss it.
Yeah.
So odd, but stands out, a month and a half later of another really weird case. Now, switch for problem one. Problem number two, which you did a little bit see on that last slide, it's too damn long.
Yeah.
I've got 3 entries here. It is the same thing in Civilization 6, Civilization 7, and then I took a stab at breaking it down a little bit more. I'm going to read these at length for anyone who is tabbed out, because I think it is really illustrative. I'm actually even going to pull up my timer, and I'm going to see how long it takes me to read all of these things.
Absolutely.
Because, that is super neat. So, from Civilization 6. It has stood for nearly 1,000 years, a monument to a god and possibly the final resting place of the Conqueror King who built it. And still, the temple at Angkor Wat endures, its central tower rising 213 feet above the surrounding jungle. Constructed by the Khmer King Suryavarman II in the 12th century in what is now northern Cambodia, it is one of the world's tallest religious monuments. A pilgrim to the city temple of the Hindu god Vishnu will first cross a 650-foot wide and a 14-feet deep moat surrounding the structure before entering a gopura, a 3-towered entrance leading to a raised walkway. Inside the temple complex proper, they would find 4 smaller towers surrounding one central 213-foot tower evoking the sacred Mount Meru. Khmer Shaivist temples typically face east, but because Angkor Wat faces west, the final resting place for Suryavarman's remains would be a temple honoring Vishnu. 54 seconds to read 150 words.
Yeah, it's so
it's long.
That one would sound better as a narration, the way that it is.
That one would sound so much better as a narration, but put a pin in that. We'll come back.
Okay, I'll put a pin in that.
Number 2 is the longest one. Instead of 7, they went and made the Codex entries better, but longer. So, we'll read this one. Angkor Wat, the name simply means City of Temples, is a vast complex in present-day Cambodia. Originally constructed as a dwelling for Vishnu, the complex went through multiple religious interpretations, from Hindu to Mahayana Buddhist to Theravada Buddhist. It has remained a place of worship for Cambodians, or Khmer, the two words are synonymous, even before its discovery by French explorers in the 19th century. The central temple is the largest religious monument in the world, built of sandstone blocks and modeled upon the Hindu-Buddhist heavens, a central mound, Meru, in the center, surrounded by 4 other blocks. Interestingly, while most temple complexes face east, Angkor faces west. Such sites can be thought of as antennae radiating the king's power and majesty to the surrounding countryside. As such, they become powerful symbols for would-be conquerors. Angkor was used as a symbol of French Indochina during the colonial occupation, and a model of the temple was added to the Grand Palace at Bangkok during the Siamese occupation of Cambodia. The site's profile also appears on Cambodian flags from the Khmer Rouge to the present day. 1 minute 3 seconds. So it's about 10 seconds longer. Now, here's a fun fact for everyone, chat. According to studies of museum exhibition spaces, visitor attention at any given object, and especially at any given object label, is anywhere from 5 to 10 seconds. It is spectacularly low, and so individual object labels in museums really try to stay between 50 and 100 words. Every single one of these is significantly longer. Now, that can be on purpose, that can be good, and there's in fact many museum labels that go much longer than about 75-ish word limit, but when we think again about player attention, asking people to divert for over a minute in order to read during their video game is actually a fairly large ask.
And I would say that even museum goers, as when you go to a museum, you are more expecting to read.
Oh,
and so
absolutely.
In comparison, I'm sure that video game thing is at 3 seconds or something.
Oh, who reads in video games?
Who reads in video games? And I think
it's hard enough to get people to read tutorials and dialogue or objectives.
Yes.
Asking people to read 200 words of historical insertion while they're doing nothing but reading is a big ask, and one that needs to be justified.
Yeah, and I think the most shocking thing about, honestly, the first one is that entire little mini paragraph doesn't even say the name at the very beginning, the first paragraph.
It's
like,
great.
The next one, even though it is longer. Oh, here we go. This is perfect. Yes.
Let's pull out that pen and let's tear this thing to shreds, because this entry is bad. This entry is so bad on several layers.
Yeah.
Firstly, you're right. The minimal change is the first word is it. What the hell is it? Even in an entry that says Angkor Wat, historical background. It.
No, you can't.
You cannot do that. Don't do that. You also identify a conqueror king before you identify king that is King Suryavarman II.
And
the first paragraph is completely unnecessary.
It is.
I hate it. Get rid of that whole thing.
It doesn't tell anything about the actual monument, to be honest. Like, it tells you a very minimal... It says, I think, final resting place are the only words in that paragraph that really matter. Like, almost.
The thing is, it's not even, right? Let me get to that second thing. Here it says possibly the final resting
possibly.
Place.
No.
We don't have Suryavarman II's bones.
Throw it out.
It is attributed to him. And yet, when we skip to the last one, it somehow moved from possibly to definitively the final resting place.
Yeah.
So we've got an illusion of historical fact going from a potential to a definite, which is unacceptable for a historical background. We have redundancy. We've got its central tower rises 213 feet. One paragraph later, surrounding the one central 213-foot tower. Yeah, you told us that. I have eyes. right? What is Mount Meru? If you don't know anything about the Hindu-Buddhist cosmography, you don't know,
No. You can't
right?
introduce new topics into things unless, which it's hard to say. It's like unless somebody's already read the Codex, but like I hate to say it, there's a chance that they haven't. And if it is one of those discoverable codexes, who knows if they've discovered it yet? So it does leave a lot of hard things. This is Civilization. We're talking about all games, but this one is Civilization 6 specifically. We're looking through just an example of one of them and decoding why it's written badly.
Yeah. So, additional small problems, right? They mention Vishnu, and then they mention Shaivist. Now, you might be able to guess that Shaivist would be the Hindu sect that views Shiva as the primary god of the cosmology.
I'm going to be very honest.
That's not guaranteed.
I was absolutely not going to guess that. As someone who
that's
has no background in this, I was not going to guess that. I don't know what I was going to guess, but I was not going to guess that.
Exactly. So, we're introducing concepts without or introducing technical terms without explaining them. We're being redundant with other information. We're alighting from historical potential to historical certainty, and we're not actually telling why is this a wonder in the game. The highlighted blue section is the reason this is a thing. It is one of the world's largest religious monuments. That is why it is a wonder within the game, and it well deserves to be a wonder in the game. But that is the only... Okay, cool, it's 213 foot, it's built by Suryavarman II, it's the world's largest religious monument. Those are the three facts you have to get across. It does that in 2 sentences. And the rest of this is complete fluff.
Yeah.
So, this entry is bad. This entry is bad in a lot of regards. If we backtrack to the previous one, this one has its own problems. I specifically think it really overuses parentheticals as a solution to giving extra information.
I hate the first line. The first line's so bad. The name simply means that, like, again, like...
Exactly.
I am one person that always tries to advocate for less academically, like, high vocabulary and all things like that. And I do definitely want things to be in a more conversational tone. That's too conversational for me. That's literally like... simply means, and I'm like, no, it doesn't. That's not simple.
Yeah,
we don't know what language that is. Like, that's not exactly how it works.
Right, I absolutely agree. Overall, this is way better, though. Emphasizing that it's been in continuous use, that it was not rediscovered in the 19th century. This was a site of active use for 900 years. That it's modeled on the Hindu-Buddhist heavens, and that it is the largest religious site in the world. All of that's there, and then we get a really interesting analytical one talking about religious sites at sites of power projection.
Yeah.
Really interesting, much more complicated, second-order historical thought. But I love it. Some really good examples. So, to address the exact points you had, Melissa, I took a stab with my community 2 weeks ago to re-edit this and cut about 20% of the entry. So instead of Angkor Wat, the name simply means City of Temples, is a vast complex in present-day Cambodia. Just Angkor Wat, or the City of Temples, is a vast complex in present-day Cambodia.
Absolutely.
Cut out 4 words, completely free, costs you nothing.
Yeah.
And reinterpreted by religious groups instead of went through. Let's make that more active instead of more passive. Making some of those changes to bring it down, get its time frame back under a minute, and try and further refine that style. Civ 7 is a much better historical codex entry than Civ 6's, but again, style is everything, and if you're not trained in writing for that particular audience, problems are going to show up.
Yeah.
Bone 4. Sometimes they're just incorrect. This is an example from Kingdom Come Deliverance 1. I can spot 3 massive errors
I'm sorry. That's
for
so funny.
medieval history on this page.
That's not what I expected.
So,
I didn't expect that. I'm trying to think.
I mean, it's a problem.
I feel like, and I feel like I have read some inaccuracies in. I'm trying to think of in Assassin's Creed Origins, but I felt like more. I have to think about them more in detail, but I think most of them were more. They didn't explain it really enough. We'll just say like they kind of just like trying to make it shorter, didn't really kind of go into as much detail as I probably would have preferred. I can't think of anything glaringly
absolutely
incorrect.
Right, and we'll come back as to why this one is the fourth problem instead of the first problem in just a moment. But let me point out these problems.
Yeah.
So, firstly, the barbarians who sacked Rome in the 5th century destroyed a great many, so a lot of red manuscripts have only been preserved indirectly via the Arab world. Wrong. Right? Certainly, it is the case that there are many classical texts that were preserved through Constantinople and through the Arab world, cycled back around to Iberia, and were reintroduced to Europe in the 1100s. That is absolutely true. Pinning that on the barbarians who sacked Rome, rather than an ongoing process from the 3rd to the 7th centuries, is the error. Like, Rome did not have every book in the world.
No,
you're pinning everything on the burning of the Library of Alexandria in the 4th.
Yeah.
Like,
which is also a whole big thing that's
not that big of an event. But also, you know, sorry, 5th century is when the Library of Alexandria burned. Alexandria is not Rome.
No.
So even if we're pinning on that, we still ding points from this. Various material. Next paragraph. Various materials were used to write on: fabric, papyrus, or vellum. That's fine. Papyrus a little bit less in this period. Parchment was expensive, therefore primarily used for codexes and deeds of privilege. The most widely used material was paper. Incorrect. Globally, yes. In Europe, no. Paper making doesn't exist before the 14th century in Europe. So charter rules, manorial records, administrative records are written on scrap vellum. They're written on parchment all the time. And it's by the turn of the 15th century, when this game is set, it's starting to change, but it will take another 50 years for paper to truly overtake parchment as the writing substrate of choice. Last big error, transcription of books was the monk's domain. By the 15th century, it absolutely was not. Monastic centers were still important literary sites up into the 17th century, but every major city had enormous manuscript production facilities. We know about Paris's in an extraordinary amount of detail, thanks to some brilliant scholarship on manuscript production on the Ile de la Cité in the 13th century. But lay manuscript production is all over the place by the 1400s. So in the time period of this game, that is also an error.
Interesting.
So,
yeah.
Also, one bonus error. Books were very heavy so as to be hard to steal. Books were heavy because the material used to make them was heavy.
I was just about to ask you a question if this is just kind of a problem of them just trying to summarize, and trying to, keep it short. No, that last one, X's that one out that I was gonna ask.
This is, they tried.
They tried.
They did not consult with the right people, and they went with their assumptions more than with high-quality research.
Absolutely, yeah.
So, it happens, but it is a problem worth acknowledging with these educational codexes, is sometimes they fail at their educational goal because they are simply wrong.
Yeah, that's definitely not great. That's definitely the worst way to not fill your educational goal. You're not that you don't have enough time or you don't have enough. No, it's literally you're wrong. You're incorrect.
So we're just wrong. It's really unlucky. So is this really a big deal? I mean, ultimately, that's a lot of errors and a lot of kind of dragging multiple dev teams back to back to back for dubious gains. This is research data from 2021 by the American Alliance of or the American Historical Association. And if you look, this basically asks, what sources did you use to learn history in the past 2 years? 69% of people used nonfiction film. 66% of people used fictional film. 11% of respondents used video games.
Okay.
It is one of the lowest ranking, right comparable with college courses or public lectures as ways to learn history. For an enormous audience of people who want to consume history, games are simply not that popular. And so it does actually ask a legitimate question of why are game developers in particular really investing in creating these educational resources in the first place, and how big of a deal is it if they kind of mess it up a bit?
Yeah.
Because people are already not engaging with it. Well, there's a couple of answers.
I will say that chart had a one for non-Wikipedia, and I'm really curious what they mean by that. The fourth one from the top is non-Wikipedia.
That is internet sites other than Wikipedia.
Okay,
so that would be like Smithsonian Magazine,
I was just making
History
sure.
Channel page. Yep.
That's what I assumed, but I was like, it's very weird that they could just said non-Wikipedia instead of non-Wikipedia internet sources, which would have been nice.
I agree, but like Wikipedia is 46%. It is the single largest internet source for historical education.
Oh, absolutely.
By such a comically large margin that it, like, you can literally break it out to Wikipedia and everything else, and everything else does not win by that much.
No, not much.
Yeah, so there's a few reasons for this to be a big deal. Firstly, this breaks down that 11% by age. Did you know people over the age of 65 do not play video games overwhelmingly?
Wow, I had absolutely no idea.
Truly a staggering result from the data here.
Staggering
result. For folks 18 to 29, that's now up to 25% of respondents have used the video games as an educational source. Additionally, I expect if there is an under 18, that number is even higher, creeping up to that like 30 to 35% mark.
Yeah.
So that's saying, you know, going forward, this is going to increase rapidly.
Yeah.
Right? That percentage, if we do that response in that question in 2025, that is going to look a lot different. I expect we'll go from 11% to closer to 15 to 20% already in the past 4 years. So it's important to talk about it now and really get best practices underway and agreed upon, so that we're able to produce high quality things, so that as this continues to scale up, we're equipping ourselves for success. Additionally, games are the most richly rendered historical environments ever created. Right, they are the most, that is their whole point, is they're incredibly good at creating worlds to be immersed in. And so even if audiences are not reporting it as a conscious thing, it's something that's likely going to happen. Also, you know, last point, even if it's a small group, it doesn't mean we should produce high quality stuff. It just means we have to be cognizant, like, if we're already investing in this in the first place, and game studios are overwhelmingly doing this, well, we should hold them to a high standard, and we should make sure that we're having the dialogue in such a way that we are improving the standard of this thing for the audience, for that 11%. Even if it is only 11%, they deserve access to high quality historical information through the media they're engaging in. So those are my answers as to why we care. This is also a point where, as we start talking about solutions, I really do want to highlight, I am not a game developer. And so there are solutions here that are based on talking with my community, anecdotal and qualitative data, and my own intuition and experiences. Really, the next step as we're talking about improving this is to get more information on the production process from a variety of game devs in a variety of different types of games, from really high budget, several hundred person production environments down to really, really small games, to really understand how they're conceiving of this, at what stage they're conceiving of this, and what decisions are guiding that implementation to be able to further refine the best practices for the industry as whole. So, as we talk about this, under the title of Fixing the Codex, we're not going to address problem number 4 in this talk. I am not worried about errors of content. Even if the best person in the world is writing it, there will be errors. Yeah. Everything I have ever written and published has at least one thing that is just factually wrong. Yeah. That's not, so, we can incrementally improve. We can work on understanding good research, bad research, but a lot of the immediate returns to take it from, a pretty good resource to a really good resource is going to be occurring in design and workflow. The research and writing content quality is what's going to take it from a very good resource to a brilliant resource. So, but we're not at that point yet. We can get big improvements on design and workflow level, and content refinement can come later. So, I guess we're about to get into some really crunchy theory and typologies here.
Yeah.
This is a great time to stop. If there are any questions from the audience, be happy to talk about anything in the problems section.
Yes. I have one question, and this is more of a preference thing. What is your favorite type of codex and your least favorite type of codex? And obviously, it definitely depends on the game. But out of those 4 categories you gave at the very beginning, do you have a favorite?
Cyclopedia is my least favorite.
Okay, yeah, I can understand that.
I don't have strong preferences in the other ones, but the Cyclopedia really doesn't typically do a lot for me. So, the other ones, my opinion is right. I've seen games that do each of those other types so brilliantly that I had a great time with them. Yeah. And I've seen games that do it in ways that really don't resonate with me that much.
And that's so. I knew that was going to happen. Essentially, it depends a lot on the gameplay and how it works.
Exactly. I don't think Cyclopedias are a bad solution, so much as they're a solution that really needs to be thought through with the vision. We'll get into this in this next section, because this is where we're doing kind of original theory.
Yeah.
Which is going to be real neat and real complicated. So, there's been a lot of research onto how people play games. So this is the Bartle taxonomy of player types, which is not the only, or I think the best taxonomy of player types, but it is a useful one. So on the left here, we split it into 2 axes. We have acting versus interacting. So those who are really exerting their will upon the world, and those who are trying to exist within the simulation and try and more of a role play interact with the world, allow NPCs to have agency instead of running around being a murder hobo.
I'm an explorer.
Right? Absolutely.
Everybody knows this about me.
So am I. Folks who are really involved, self-centered on what can I, the player, do, and players who are much more interested in experiencing the world and don't mind if their character is kind of a nothing burger. So when we combine those, we end up with killers, murder hobos, quite literally. Achievers, folks who are trying to run around and do all of the stuff. Socializers, folks who want to exist in the world, talk with communities. MMO players often will fall into this group, where they're in there to have a social experience that they can share with friends, and so they really care about that memorability. And then they have these explorers, these folks who want to get totally lost in the world, and see what discoveries come out of that.
Everybody knows me when I play Minecraft, which I don't usually play on stream. I am terrified of the mines. I'm terrified of any sort of thing trying to kill me. And so the only thing I do in Minecraft is I map. I have a massive map
Incredible.
temple, and I just go on very long journeys where I avoid everybody, and I map, and I collect, and I find hidden treasure, and then I go home and I put all the maps together. That's all I do. I don't do anything
Delightful.
else, and I don't do anything that is considered
Incredible.
actually Minecraft.
So yeah, you are like you're not just in the Explorer.
No,
You're somewhere down like around
I'm,
here. Like,
I'm all the way down there, and especially even in a lot of the Assassin's Creed games, like I sometimes will get so distracted, and I will just be like, especially like in when I played Origins for the first time, I was like, what? And I also had never really played a video game like that when I started, and so like
sure.
it took me. It still has. It is. I'm still like barely in Shadows, and I've been playing it for weeks now because we're just like I have to go and I have to map everything and I have to figure everything out
Oh yeah.
and all that. But yeah, I'm absolutely in that explorer category. Nothing else.
Absolutely. Then we've also have done a lot of research done on who visits cultural experiences like museums. Now, this is partly a little bit of my bias. I got to hear John Falk talk literally 2 weeks ago at a conference. This is also not my favorite taxonomy of museum goers, but it's a pretty good one, a pretty widely used one. So we have again explorers, folks who are going because it's a topic that interests them. They want to see, they want to learn something. We have facilitators, people who want to go experience, bring a friend to this experience, or get an experience to take back to their family and persuade them to come with. They're trying to make everyone have a good time. Experience seekers, people who want something big and shiny and novel and new. Professionals, did you know museums are really good at making things for other museum people?
Yeah, they do.
So people who are already hobbyists in the subject are frequent museum goers or work in museums or other heritage institutions. They're their own category with their own set of expectations. And then there's this kind of ephemeral fifth group of rechargers who people are going to museums to escape the busyness of the world around them, who are looking for some sort of peace and reset and relaxation. So kind of museum going as escapism.
Yeah, absolutely.
Now there's quite a few points of overlap between these. And so if you start hybridizing these two things, you can get some sort of experience or taxonomy of who plays historical games specifically and what are possible behaviors. Again, we need a lot more actual observational and survey data to really reinforce these as the right categories, but I'm going to propose 6. We have our explorers, we have our socialites, we have our tourists, we have action heroes, we have hobbyists, and we have, casuals, which I do not say in a derogatory way, but definitely casual or combination players.
Yeah.
So, let's go into more detail about each of them. The explorer. They love the act of discovery, right? They're going into a world to get lost, to wander around, and to walk away with new knowledge, new appreciation. So, they may not read everything you present to them, but are really going to follow their own interests and hiding things out in the corners of the world. And they're the group that's going to go find those things. So they're going to really like your discoverable codex, right? They wandered around, they found something, they get rewarded for that with information. They'll secondarily like tooltips because they'll see, oh, there's a thing with a line under it. Let me hover over that, see what it's about, see if we'll discover something. The socialite. They're, in here mostly to get an experience to be part of a community. These are your folks who are likely posting screenshots on Reddit, all that jazz. So they may want the codex mainly to get some trivia or sort of fun fact-sized things. They're also most likely to be playing with someone next to them, which fundamentally changes your play experience. Like, you want to be if you're playing, you've got someone next to you, you want to make sure you're a good host, you're keeping them entertained. And that's going to affect the way you engage with the game. they're also not going to really want a lot of disruption to that game flow or to that narrative experience. So these audiences are going to really like your tooltips for that minimal disruption. You're in, you're out in about 10 seconds. And they're going to really like your meta ones because the meta ones feed into the mystery, things that they can share into the community, blur that boundary to the thing that they're really trying to seek out. Type 3, the tourist. These are your museum experience seekers. They want novel experiences. They're the ones who know what are the big landmarks, who are the big shiny people. They're in it primarily to see those. So, in Assassin's Creed Shadows, they have Osaka Castle in Osaka. Osaka Castle wasn't built yet in the time period of the game. In a classic Assassin's Creed formula, Osaka Castle was built 20 years later. Well,
I didn't know that.
yeah, there's some wobbliness. There's a couple of stages of fortification, but the full version of Osaka Castle that exists in the game has not been completed yet. I believe Hideyoshi will complete it around in the 1590s. So,
okay. Well, then,
yeah,
that's good to know.
Don't quote me on those dates because, as always, I am a historian who is terrible at dates.
I'm terrible at dates too. I will never quote you on any dates because I will forget them immediately. That's the big
incredible. I love that for all of us. Chat, forget those numbers too.
Forget the numbers.
But yeah, right. But these folks are basically playing a historical game to be a tourist in the foreign country that is the past.
Yeah.
And so their desire is immersion and entertainment. I also want to highlight, I view completionism as a sort of hybrid type, some explorer elements, but also it's effectively power gaming tourism.
Yeah.
Right? So let me think of in Oblivion, you want to do every guild quest, you want to see the end of every narrative through line. There's some exploratory elements to that, but also there's a lot of touristy elements that you feel like you didn't get the full experience. I want to have the full experience when I do this. And so that is tourism turned it up to 11 into power gaming. So I view it as a subcategory within here.
Yeah.
For the most part, these folks are probably going to like your discoverable codex. They may be okay with a Civilopedia as a secondary one because they see the thing, they want to learn about the thing, they'll go reference the thing. But they don't really have a preference for that because they're not going to seek out that information in advance of it unlocking or in advance of them getting to the big shiny thing. But you cannot have a big shiny thing and then not give them information.
Yeah.
Type next, the action hero, including the speedrunner. Their job is to break a game. They are all about mechanical player expression. And, the game should challenge them. But they're not playing a historical game mostly for the history. They're playing it because they like the mechanics. They're playing it because they like crushing their enemies. I mean, how many CK3 players, their goal is to become king of the universe.
Yeah, absolutely.
Period, end of discussion. And the historical setting, completely secondary. They're playing all of the Paradox games. They don't care about the setting. They want to paint that map.
Yeah, exactly.
So they don't care about tooltips if there's mechanical information in there. And they're more likely to read a tooltip than to read anything else. But they don't give a shit about your codex.
Yeah.
If you're part of the language, they simply do not care.
No.
And so don't design for these folks. Just tip for any aspiring devs out there. Don't design for these folks. They're the least likely group of players to read your codex.
Or at the least, have a turn off codex button. That if anyone gets really annoyed, you can just turn it off. It would suck because that's a lot of work to do, but I don't think that's the worst little tiny thing to do just in case there's some people who don't want it.
Exactly. Right? Designing the codex for them means getting the codex out of their way so that they can do their thing. That's fine. The fifth type, and the last type that really has defined goals, is the hobbyist. These are the folks who are playing the historical game because it is historical. Hi. Both of us are hobbyists. We'll sometimes do other behavior, but when we're choosing a game to stream, The fact that it's historical, and historical within a setting we already know something about,
Exactly.
is a major decisive factor.
Mm-hmm.
So these are the folks that are going to be the most critical of your codex, the ones who are going to catch errors in your world design, in your codex, but also the ones who are really trying to see what are you doing, recognize the small details you're putting in, and will appreciate the insight into the research process.
Mm-hmm.
So they're going to really like those discoverable ones because of all that information, and they'll like the Civilopedia so that they have that reference material if there's something they don't know, but they're able to go like, hang on, is this a thing? Then look at it and be like, ooh, yes it is. And sometimes go like, I don't believe you, Codex. Good. The solutions I identify later should help reduce the chance of that.
Yeah. Good to know. Right.
Last up is the casual or the combination. These are sort of your rest and recharging equivalents. These are folks who are playing mostly because it's a big game. It's popular right now. They want to relax. They want to unwind. They're playing only for 1.5, 2 hours a night tops. They may not have any particular play goal in mind when they start the game, and so or they may move through several different play goals and player types over the course of a session. And so these folks, right, if you're making it appealing, interesting, they will follow you almost anywhere. But you're going to have to focus on style and design as solutions with whatever codex type you're trying to use. So, who likes what? Let's bring this all together because we've got 4 categories in one taxonomy and 6 categories in another taxonomy. Not everything appeals to everybody.
Yep.
Not everything should appeal to everybody. That would be a ridiculous ask.
That's always true. Absolutely.
And this is the point also where I am happy to be corrected on these if folks disagree. If you do disagree, please just throw it into chat. We don't need to redeem the channel points for this. I want that instant poll in this exact particular case. But our Civilopedia, in my mind, in order, targets our tourists the most, our explorers the second, our hobbyists third, and our action heroes, if there is tutorializing information in them, fourth. If there is not tutorializing information in them, the action hero will never visit the Civilopedia.
Yep.
But if there's, gameplay tips and historical background data, sometimes you can get them to stick around long enough to skim the historical background data. Our discovery type is going to target explorers primarily, hobbyists second, tourists third, and then these casual or combination players fourth. Our pop-up or tooltip versions are going to have our tourists, our explorers, our action heroes, and then our casual and combination players. Hobbyists probably won't like these because either they already know all the information, or they're like, tell me more about that. And then the game doesn't, and then they're sad about it. And then our meta one targets our socialites, a group otherwise completely untargeted by these things. Our tourists, our explorers, and then at the bottom are hobbyists. Yeah. And this, being third on the list does not mean that someone doesn't care about this, but rather that it is targeting other ones first.
Yeah. And I will say, as somebody who obviously is a museum person and obviously loves going to museums, I am probably one of the worst museum readers of all time.
Oh, don't worry. I know museum directors who flat out do not read labels at museums. It's so funny.
I am not even joking you. I was supposed to go to an exhibit with my mother 2 weekends ago, and she could not come with me, and I was like, well, I have to go see it because this is the only day that I have off before it closes. And I went to the museum. It was a special exhibit. I go up to the 3rd floor. And it's not a big exhibit. There were probably 4 or 5 rooms. I might have been in there for 20 minutes. And it was...
That's not bad. Oh, that's not bad at all.
It was kind of bad. I was like, suddenly I walked out and I was like, did I literally just take an hour-long train to get here for 20 minutes in this museum? And luckily I got it for free. I got it for free. I didn't have to pay, which was always nice. But I realized if I had gone with my mother, I would have, like, that is the reason sometimes I stay longer, is because I'm there to discuss it with her, point out things. She will come over and say, did you read that? And I'll go and read that. Like, I realize I really don't read them. And so when you pulled up those images, I was actually going to say that I was more an explorer or a tourist, because, like, I was thinking hobbyist, but I was like, I know museum people are people who stay in a museum for literally ever because they read every single label. But I know there's me and I've met other museum people that don't like labels.
So, I mean, within the types of museum goers, it sounds to me an awful lot like your mother is a facilitator, that she's going there to share the experience with you, drag you along to see everything.
Absolutely.
And you're actually a professional. You're going there as a professional. You're kind of already engaged in the museum. You don't need to be persuaded that the museum exhibit is going to be good. But you're mostly there to be like, hey, here's extra information, and if you're on it with it on your own, you kind of see that, recognize the extra information, and move on. That can happen very quickly.
And the very interesting thing that I thought of later is that, like, I didn't read a lot of the labels. This was a Muka exhibit, which I am not a, like, more modern art person, but I have always liked his work. And what I realized that is so funny is that I would not say that I was like a Civilopedia person, but what did I go and do when I got home? I read his entire Wikipedia. I sat in bed and I read the entire thing and other Wikipedia pages of people associated with him, and specifically then looked up other pieces that were not in this exhibit. And I literally was like, I just don't really engage with it when I'm in person, which is so weird to think about. But I think I might be a Civilopedia person. Oh, this is very interesting.
Right.
I'm learning things about myself.
Right. Within this, though, I mean, right, whether you're a Civilopedia person or not, really depends on what are these formats mechanically designed for, and also when you're playing a game, do you actually click on the thing?
Yeah,
like,
that is true.
If you don't click on the thing, it's not a type that resonates with you, regardless of whether in other contexts you might be doing it. It's just, does your play behavior view this as a valuable supplement during the play session? Right, that's my takeaway from these set, is that on a structural level, different taxonomies of codexes target different taxonomies of audiences, and the execution will affect the exact ordering of things, but there's sort of structural elements to each of them that really, I think, builds this out, so that different play behavior resonates more strongly with different structures of historical information. So, one fun fact that I realized, and this was actually a revelation to me while I was working on this talk: who is never the top group in a tournament or in one of these codexes? One of the six, well, I mean, two of the six categories are not targeted. One of them we expect, one of them we don't.
I was gonna say the action heroes we expect. We don't really expect them to really want it. Now I'm trying to look at the other versions. Explorers? Is that did you have explorers as one? No, you have that.
Discovery is explorers.
Oh, okay. I'm blanking on the third. Hobbyists? Is hobbyists not?
Hobbyists.
Oh.
Hobbyists are, I don't think, ever the audience most targeted by the mechanical structures of codexes right now, which is really freaking weird.
It's
because
weird.
Hobbyists are the people who play historical games because they're historical.
But I feel like, well, it is a little weird, but it also makes sense because people, the developers might assume that a hobbyist doesn't think that the game is going to be good enough or like accurate enough for a hobbyist to actually want to play it. That might just be one hot take, but
I would interpret it in a different way, in that developers will often assume hobbyists will read it regardless.
Yeah, that's also true.
So you don't need to specifically cater to them.
Yeah.
Or they simply are not recognizing that there's a structural issue happening here.
True.
Because unfortunately, structural issue aside, hi, yes, I am the definition of a hobbyist.
Yeah.
right? We both, I mean, we both are. Like,
I
we're
both
Twitch streamers who
am.
play historical games.
Yeah, I definitely am in the sense that like, and we do. I find that I don't go. For example, like we are playing Shadows right now on Tuesdays, and we don't. At the moment, I'm not going deeper into the Codex because I am slightly worried about like spoilers. But I was saying like earlier, I am like really desperate to read Oda Nobunaga's entire Wikipedia page in like one sitting, but I'm a little like I think that we've kind of passed the point where he's like in the storyline, but I am kind of waiting because I'm worried that there is spoilers because I know that there are actual
Yep.
historical events that might get slightly like I might figure
Uh,
out what's I might and the other thing is that I also am very good at predicting games, and I also don't want to give any chance that I will not actually predict a game. I will be spoiled for the prediction of a big twist or something like that.
Yeah, I will simply say there will be no doubt when Nobunaga stops being relevant to the
Yes.
story.
Yeah. I think
You
I
know.
think I have gotten to that point finally, but I'm still like I don't I because I do tend to do like Wikipedia page hopping. Like essentially
Sure.
it's like if I read the entirety of Obunaga's, then I'm gonna go to the guy who ruled next, and then I know that's gonna like so I
You're
know
gonna know
I need
what
to
happens pretty. Yep.
yeah, I need to stop myself earlier on than later.
Yes. If you know the big thing in Kyoto has happened, then congratulations.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So shout outs to the Hodoji incident. Yep. So yeah. Right. Well, there's some possible reasons why we're not designing for them, but it is still weird because that is the audience that, on paper, is the most likely to be trying to seek out those educational experiences. I expect hobbyists to be really overrepresented in that 11% of people who said, yeah, we're
True.
actively using video games as a historical source. Uh, and also, they're the ones who will give a shit about tea production in Ujitawara. Like, topically, oftentimes hobbyists should be your intended audience. So the fact that we don't, the most common codex types, don't actually target them is kind of a big missed opportunity. So, what does this actually look like if we try to do this? This is one potential solution from the 2014 game Never Alone. If you've never heard of Never Alone, it is phenomenal. It is developed by a group of Inupiaq people in conjunction with a French-Canadian developer, I believe. But the goal of the game, in many ways, is effectively it's telling an Inupiaq folktale, or well, pseudo folktale, right? I don't think it's actually based on a real oral tradition. I think it's an invented story. But as you go through very simple platforming or exploration challenges, you unlock video documentaries that mix archival footage and interviews with members of the team and with members of the Inupiaq community that the team is from to teach people about the culture, history, and livelihood of the Inupiaq.
Wow. It's amazing.
It's really cool, and the video documentaries are incredibly well produced. Also, it's getting a sequel finally after 10 years, and I am so excited.
That's great.
Woohoo!
I love that.
So, something like this, given how that video, nonfiction video, is the most popular source of historical information in the United States, something like this really is targeting that historical or culturally engaged audience in a way that text entries may not be, especially due to the quality of production. Now, I will say, they are not the only ones to do this. Age of Empires 4 has video segments that unlock after the campaign. So you finish a campaign, you have a little blurb, you'll get some text entries on either major events, major movements, major people that were featured in that scenario, and you might get a video, a short video on the clip or on a technology, on a kind of national history event, etc., within this context.
Cool.
So it's really, like, video is becoming slowly more popular. You might also look at, instead of saying, oh, the Codex is the way we target hobbyists, you might look at other things. So this is a place where we bring back in those mini games through archival, bring in like digital replicas of real world objects to try and do some object-based learning. This is a place where like Pentiment actually does a really fantastic job. Throughout the game, there will be periods where you do mini games directly based on historical labor practices. So, you know, making horseshoes in a mini game where you're at a forge, turning wool into yarn with a drop spindle, actually twisting it in your fingers. And so that's there's glimmers of alternate ways beyond the Codex of really targeting people who want those education and incorporating that more strongly into the moment-to-moment gameplay experience. So there's a lot of motion in this, but I don't think we've really super successfully figured out what the best way is to get the hobbyist audience, this already historically engaged audience, really resonating on a structural level with your history codex.
Yeah. Have you ever played this is a silly game for you to play, but I have played this. C14 dating.
I see. The comedy anthropology dating sims remain a thriving genre. I've not played that. I have played other silly history.
You have? Okay. We have played it 2 Valentine's Days in a row, and then when poor little Melissa has unsucceeded to get a bow, we have given up because it apparently is so difficult of a game that like you literally have to make sure you're doing literally everything correct to actually get any date in the end. But it also, it doesn't it has, I think, a codex, if I really think about it, because they're talking about a Neanderthal archaeological site in Belgium that
phenomenal. Yeah.
I don't know if it's a real site, but I do remember that there was and I told this, people were very, very honest about this. This game was so boring at the beginning because it was info dumping so much accurate archaeological, like, factoids, and it was doing it through like communication. It wasn't doing it through a codex. It was mostly doing it through the characters talking to you. But I remember I remember being like, guys, this is really accurate. I'm very shocked. And then just like click, 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 click. But it did have mini games, which I'm trying to remember. There were only 2. I think one was a digging simulator, but it wasn't. That one was okay, and then another one was a conservation one, and the conservation one was so bad, and I failed at it so many times that I think it's the reason why I never successfully like got anything in this game. And it was one of the problems is that I think it was one of the most accurate games in showing like what a field school would be like and kind of the interactings with people and like, hate to say it, a lot of field schools I've been on, people have had little romances and stuff. So it's not actually, that's not even that inaccurate. But the gameplay, unfortunately, like really, really suffered because I really wanted to see how the game progressed. And I think one time I tried, you don't have to play the mini games. You can choose like not to at the very beginning. And I think that extremely hindered me for some reason. And I still, again, never figured out how to actually leave this multi-week field school with a boyfriend. And it was really, really annoying.
Incredible.
But it did have those mini games, which I never really thought of them being kind of part of the codex because they weren't necessarily the most accurate thing, but they did kind of teach you a little bit about it as well.
Right. I wouldn't count them as quite part of the codex yet, but it very much like those sort of deviate from your standard narrative goals and your standard, in fact, often social behaviors in order to do something that is explicitly kind of drawing out, trying to give the player some sort of practice-based education, and so ends up like in a very related paradigm, which makes that neat.
Yeah. Love that.
Cool. Now, let's move into actually fixing it. So, hobbyists, when we think purely structural mechanics, are not the primary audience of our most common types of codex. But I think it's without question that they tend to pick topics and write content in a way that assumes the hobbyist is their primary audience.
Mm-hmm.
Person who already wants to learn about history, let's pick content, let's pick ideas that do this. There's a few possible explanations. Any of these are equally viable, and some combination of them will depend on what team is writing. So there's no single answer here, but 4 possible answers are that devs and their consultants have a preconception or often a misconception that hobbyists are in fact your primary target audience. And so, your consultants are themselves hobbyists. Your devs, if they're passionate about the setting, are themselves hobbyists. And so they're writing, bringing down to number 3, right? They're writing for hobbyists. We're really good at writing for people like us. And if we assume this, if we're in that paradigm, because that's our lived experience, we write for people who are like us. And that means instead of writing for other audiences, your hobbyists are writing for hobbyists.
Mm-hmm.
Option 2, they're making decisions to sort of patch a gap, right? So they're writing, they're just trying to fill in little bits of knowledge, especially with our option 3, right, our tooltip ones. They're just kind of trying to patch knowledge gaps, and so this is sort of a good enough thing that they're not really super focused on this. Or option 4, which unfortunately does sometimes happen, the target audience for the Codex in a game is nobody.
Yeah.
That it is entirely the development team showing off how much they know.
Yeah, honestly.
And that's right. I don't assume malice from any dev team because, sharing stuff you know is the coolest feeling in the world. Yes, I have a Twitch channel that is really kind of grounded in my ability to learn things and then share them. But it's also my day job is learn things and then share them. But it's an instinct. This instinct of just sharing, being enthusiastic.
Yeah.
When it is not tempered in best practices and intentionality, ends up doing more harm than good. And harm in this case is just it doesn't resonate with anyone. People aren't really engaging with it.
And I hate to say it, sometimes I can understand this because while you are developing a game, it is sometimes kind of hard to know who your audience would be if there is not already if it's a series of games, you have the Assassin's Creed games, you have the Civilization games, hopefully you know who your audience is. But when you are a small indie gamer developer and you're not, nobody knows who you are, nobody knows what this game is going to be like, how can you predict your audience? It is very hard to say unless you literally go out there and you poll your audience and you try to find people who are interested in it.
Absolutely. So this is a place where literature, we need a stronger body of literature. We need a stronger body of accumulated data from studios of a lot of different sizes, and we need to be really engaging in building collective knowledge around some sort of theoretical taxonomy in order to help teams make that decision in a way that is viable when going out and just kind of asking people till you find someone who says, ooh, I like that, because that's not sustainable.
No.
So, before we get into our much more concrete suggestions, this is another great time to pause for questions, because there's been a lot of theory and a lot of taxonomy happening here. So, let's just check in. Chat, does anyone have any questions on that stage of the talk?
Anyone have any questions? I think the one question I have is more. I'll save it for the end because I have a feeling you might cover it. If you don't, I will save it to the end. Oh, that's a good question, Wolfie. How do so this is on a slightly separate. How do museums target hobbyists and professionals in that case?
Right. So museums. I mean, professionals are kind of frequently by accident the target audience of museums because museum people are professionals. And museums are really, really, really good at targeting professionals. Like, if you poll other museum goers who go to an exhibit, it's typically like 80 to 90% of them thought it was great. And it's like, oh boy. So, kind of our fundamentals of exhibit design, like the concept of combining interesting historical objects with interpretive text and constructing educational narratives, almost by default targets professional audiences. But, this is where large scale, often non-interactive didactics end up targeting them. Dense object labels often end up targeting them. Object selection and groupings, trying to make sure that's representative, targets them. And programming, particularly behind the scenes programming, really targets them.
Yeah. And I was going to say, not unnecessarily like what they are targeting, but a lot of museum professionals, depending on where you are in the world, are sometimes part of historical organizations that often get free entry. So, for example, I went to this exhibit because I'm a professional and my work pays for a American Alliance of Museums professional membership.
Well, I love it.
And it is literally like the biggest flex when I can walk in and say, do you have a AAM membership discount? And they're like, oh, you can go in for free. And then you can go to the gift shop and they say, oh, you can get 10% off. And I go, ooh, I can. And it's really great. I know I had to go find my card because my boss, in a flood at our site, may have lost the new preferred card. Yeah, it's a whole big thing. But I found it on my phone and I was like, I have my old card, but I also have a screenshot on my phone. The girl's like, you're fine. And I'm like, yeah, I have this all the time. And those are kind of things that are usually, like, they usually are advertised somewhere on their website, but more often than not, it is the professional that knows, for the most part, you can kind of go to any museum for free. Sometimes you might have to pay for like a special exhibit, but there might be a discount. Like, that is also just a way that, like, in general, museums will typically target other museum professionals because we know that we can, more often than not, go there for free.
Exactly. So, right, kind of the barriers to entry for certainly other literal professionals, extremely low. Even for people who are frequent museum goers, but do not work at a museum or a cultural institution, but still fall under this sort of behavioral category of professionals. Topic selection and our fundamentals of exhibit design really have historically targeted them. And so a lot of ongoing discussion in exhibit design is actually breaking that, because targeting professionals is a solved problem.
Yes.
Objects with text information on a label is your mechanical, organized in the structure of an exhibit.
Yeah.
Is your structural targeting of a profession.
Yeah. They don't got to do much extra for us. If you make an exhibit, we will come. Yeah.
It's kind of like, I mean, that's how museums have structured themselves historically throughout the existence of museums as a concept, right? In the 1960s, the transition of modern, like, contemporary art museums to what is now the standard of the big white room with a row of paintings with a very tiny label next to it with no information whatsoever was actually radical at the time.
I hate it.
Because it wasn't trying to target the professional, it was trying to let the artwork attract different audiences.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's kind of reverted because professionals love to kind of absorb everything and stay on top of trends and sort of subsume other categories. But at the time, that was actually a big thing and was an attempt to find a different audience. Just like the move into really play-based learning in things like children's museums, interactives, especially digital interactives, and increasingly elaborate set-piece design is really the modern version of trying to find an audience who isn't professionals, who is also being targeted by this.
Absolutely. Very, very good point.
Yeah. Does anyone have other questions on the taxonomy stage of this? Otherwise, we'll get into some more concrete solutions and
Put in the chat what type of gamer slash museum goer you are.
True.
I know we had some people contemplating what type of person they were, which I think is this is very
our
innately
hobbyists,
like our
hobbyists should be widely overrepresented in this particular group.
I was gonna say most I think are, but I do think this weirdly labeling ourselves is very like teen magazine of all of us, and I kind of love it.
Just a little bit. Yeah.
Just a little bit. And yes, I do think this also depends on the game in a lot of ways. Like, obviously, we are all playing a lot of history-based games, but I have noticed, like, it really depends on what history we're talking about for me. The Egypt one, I'm all over that. I need to know exactly what you're saying about everything. Some of the other ones I couldn't care less about, and I'm just like, or I'll look at it later. I'm like, I don't need to know now, it's fine, I understand what's going on. And it just definitely depends on what the content of the game is.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah, we got a lot of hobbies.
Let's move on to our suggestions. I mean, yeah, my folks go hobbyist. Assassin's Creed, you're a hobbyist.
And that is very interesting.
With little bits of tourist or action hero in other genres.
That was one of the things I was going to talk about, because I tend to be a completionist, but I also tend to not be a full completionist. It's kind of depending on the game. Essentially, when it comes to after I have finished the story, there are certain things that I think I have to complete for me to be satisfied. For example, Assassin's Creed 2, or Assassin's Creed 1, there was all the feathers, and there's no map for the feathers, and I'm like, no way in hell I'm collecting all these feathers. They don't mean anything to me. And even in the second one, when they tempted me with, if I collected all the feathers, my mother would be happy, I still was not going to collect all the feathers, because I said
absolutely not. That sounds foul.
If I saw a feather, I would collect it, but I would set goals for myself as like, I want to complete all of these things, I want to complete all of these things. And so I don't think I have like, I think the only one that I have like 100%ed was Origins, because there was and that was only because the Ubisoft platform had a percentage that I would watch go up. If they don't have that, it's not tempting to me. It's kind of weird about that. It's like, Odysseys was weird. It didn't really work because I didn't do some stuff, but it said I had 100%. Like, it just didn't. I was like, but it doesn't matter if it's not saying it. You made your own feather maps, Wolfie. My God, the dedication.
Yep. But yeah, right. So, as hobbyists and explorers are the two, in at least my community, the ones that I would expect to be interested in what I'm doing in the first place, and so likely to show up. With tourists as sort of a distant third. But yeah, some folks here very much go all in on that like completionist level of tourism, and I had to experience XYZ things. Right, there isn't necessarily that sense of discovery, right? Or the I want to get lost in it. No, I want to do specific checklists of things.
Yeah.
While I am in this space.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes that checklist is every damn thing the game has to offer. But hey, I definitely know people who are like, I have to hit up every museum, every landmark, everything. When I go to Athens, I must hit everything, because otherwise I did not experience Athens properly. And that's an unhinged behavior in my mind, but also I kind of respect it a lot.
I was thinking about this. I was thinking that there has to be a combo that is a explorer tourist versus a regular tourist, because I am one of those people that, like, I've told people I am not a relaxation tourist. Unless I'm going to beach, that's the only example for me. If I'm going to the beach, I am not expected to do. But one of my friends didn't understand why why I don't like going on cruises, or why I have no desire to go on a cruise. And I'm like, where is this cruise going? Where's this cruise going? Is it going to Athens? Am I going to go see the Parthenon? Or am I going to a beach in the middle of nowhere that all it has is that relaxation? I'm not going to spend the amount of money that like a cruise is if I could spend the money to go and see every single archaeological site in a small area. And so I feel like there is that type of tourist because like I am definitely not that person that is looking for cool food, looking to like go out to bars and go out to clubs. Like I am the explorer tourist who is trying to hit all of those specific places, usually for education, but also possibly for like sightseeing, seeing cool things, seeing beautiful things, rather than I as long as I eat good food, I'm fine. I'm not looking for the trendy stuff. I'm not looking for. My brother went to Thailand and went to a Michelin star restaurant. I'm like, why are you going? What's the point of that? Like, you wasted money. You could have just gone to see something. Like, and that's just my opinion. That is how I like travel, and so I feel like
Absolutely.
I love that there is that tourist category, though.
Yeah. So this is an important thing, of course, to emphasize, is that these are not static categories, and these are not clearly delineated categories. Right? Taxonomies are just trends. They're just trends in how people engage, especially with the history aspect of these historical games. So people absolutely move back and forth across taxonomies, and at any given moment may exist somewhere in between them. So absolutely, and I fully encourage that. Right. Obviously, within the context of the game, foodies, not really a relevant category.
Very true.
Until Taste Division gets invented, I don't think we have to really worry about foodies as a category of.
But I would say like the socialites, like there are
absolutely
there are people that like I want to go on like a walking tour and I want to meet people, and I'm like, no.
I want to go on a walking tour to see old buildings.
I want to go on the walking tour to see old buildings. I do not need to go on like a bar walking tour or a foodie walking tour. I'm going on a walking tour to go see things. I don't care about people. Like I have myself, and that's me, and that's all I need.
Okay, yeah. KJ, I mean that I know exactly which museum you went to. That museum rules. I fully respect that decision.
Oh my gosh, I love it.
All of this is to you get some formulation of who is your audience, and so that we can start to actually think about how do we incorporate the Codex in a way that actually targets them and creates experiences that they want to engage with. So, step one, make a plan. Our problem is not that there's no pre-production happening. There is a lot of pre-production happening in games generally, and with game codexes specifically. You have to identify consultants, do research, design the UI. For something like Assassin's Creed Shadows, select the historical art pieces that are being referred to within the codexes that you can visualize. You have to reach out to museums to get licensing and permission, and all of that has to happen before you start actually writing the damn thing. So there's clearly a lot of pre-production happening. However, that pre-production is in some way being misallocated, and therefore we're not really resulting in integrating this effectively within a development cycle. So specifically, I see that codexes are often not integrating with the rest of a design. In a Civilopedia's case, they literally exist as a button that is self-siloed, and you never need to click that button if you don't feel like it. But they're also not really responding to how other members of the team are constructing narrative and quest design, moment-to-moment player engagement arc, understanding where attention is at any given moment, and making sure all of those questions are sort of discussed and thought through throughout all stages of construction. Additionally, I think there's sometimes some unimaginative elements here, where games are a very imaginative, playful space, and then codexes are all text. And so we're not really thinking about how player verbs, how player actions, really supplement and engage with this concept either. So, on a high level, the goal of really having these conversations, talking about your target audience, integrating this very early in the development pipeline, etc., is to create a more engaging codex experience for a variety of player groups. And the expected output should be a style guide. Style guides are incredibly boring, but incredibly, incredibly important.
Absolutely.
So What player groups are you targeting with this codex? How should entries be formatted? Some ideas of topics, you don't have to lock that down early on. Stylistic features regarding entry length, tone, complexity, implementation type, and that further integrates throughout the development cycle as specific quests get locked down to make sure that it integrates with those. To cycle back to the Assassin's Creed Shadows example of tea production, that was a codex entry on Tokugawa Ieyasu, I'd be thrilled.
Yeah.
Because that's exactly who I am expecting to get a codex entry about at that moment. Instead, it was about tea production. Cool. Fun fact. We did integrate the codex with the player attention.
Absolutely.
So make sure that we're talking about that and we're conscious about that from the beginning of conception.
Quick question.
Step 2. Yes.
Would you prefer, for that specific example, would you prefer if the discoverable came up before or after you actually met the character? I know it said the goal was to meet the character after. Okay, just making sure, because that's what I would prefer as well.
Absolutely, because attention economy, right, occurs in arcs. And so if you're in a rising action of an arc of anticipation for meeting this figure, you're promising something,
Yeah.
and then your codex is a sidestep from that promise.
Yeah.
Well, we're already get through the climax, get through the high of meeting someone, reward them for that, and then we reset while we're thinking of a new objective, and that's a great time to get a new codex.
Yeah, I 100% agree. That's what I was thinking too.
Yep. Step 2, actually make the thing. We've got a few different problems. Writing on codexes is incredibly uneven in so many games. The bigger the game, the more uneven this gets. Let's believe Assassin's Creed Shadows a little bit more, because some of those entries are phenomenal. Some of those entries are really, really, really detailed. Some entries have untranslated Japanese romaji. So, right, Latin alphabet with a Japanese word untranslated, and with no hint of what the translation is. And then there's some, way up on the north end of the map, I found an entry on banditry that said, in Japan, bandits are highwaymen, robbers, and pillagers. And my response, folks in my chat, from my community know, my response was, as opposed to bandits somewhere else?
It's so random. It's just, why do you have to... And was that under the, types of people? Because I know there's a section that's like...
That was a cultural discovery entry.
Oh, no, that's weird. Because I know they have the sections that are like, these are the type of warriors and stuff. So, I don't expect much from those unless it's gameplay stuff. But that's weird that it's under the cultural part. That's really weird.
Yeah, no, it was a cultural discovery thing on piracy and banditry.
Yeah, that's
and it literally just said... So, it was a Japanese... institution that wrote that cultural discovery entry, and the object is credited as a Japanese cultural heritage agglomerate. So I suspect that there was a localization issue that kind of affected that. It would still be too basic, but instead of saying this Japanese word is used en masse to refer to yada yada yada, they translated the Japanese word and then provided a lot of synonyms to the translation.
Okay.
So that's what I suspect happened there, is we had some localization issues. But, that's the thing your style guide should absolutely address. That still falls within this problem, where you didn't talk about how are you using words in foreign languages, what are your rules for providing translations of those.
Yeah.
And that wasn't communicated to the development team, the localization team, or to the people writing the entries. So, right... we may assume too much or too little knowledge. We may not be communicating the same thing to all participating writers. We also may not grasp what players care about. Their codex entry has to meet players where they are. The fact, I was going to talk about how Assassin's Creed Shadows, despite having 50-something historical figures in it, had no codex entries about all these historical figures.
Yeah.
And then they patched it in between when I wrote this talk and now.
And I'm so glad they did, yeah.
It's so mean. There's 34 historical figure entries in the game now, so they still didn't get everybody, but they did get a lot of people.
Yeah. That is a lot.
Including some people that I wouldn't necessarily have expected them to get, so that was really cool to see. But yeah, that's neat. And then Problem 3. I'm sorry, they're too damn long.
Yeah.
With the exception of tooltip, the tooltip type, and to a lesser extent the meta type, the complaint does not apply to you. Encyclopedias are discoverables. You're too long.
Too long.
So, our solutions on a very concrete level, you need to limit your total number of writers. You cannot just reach out to every institution on the planet and have them each write one. That's too many cooks in the kitchen. And then you need one person to be the overall editor. Right? You can have up to about 10 different people writing entries, as long as you've got one person who is the central figure that all text flows through and all style gets approved by. You can still have unique author voices, but you gotta have someone enforcing your style guide, and that means you have one person who is in charge of the final proofing of stuff. Period. End of discussion. And that person needs to be damn good at their job. Like, invest in that person. That can be your narrative designer. That's not the end of the world. But someone has to make sure that everything is about the same tone, about the same level of complexity, about the same length.
Yeah, exactly.
Then, step 2. Edit more. However much editing you've been doing,
do more.
Do more. Right? This applies for all public-facing writing and really all writing in general, even though it's the worst feeling thing in the world, at least to me. But when you get to what you think is your last draft, cut 20% of it. You may not always quite hit 20%, but you write 10 in a really polished draft. You can cut 10% and really cut no content. At 20%, that's when you really have to start thinking about what's important, what are the takeaways, because you're not going to be able to keep all of the actual content writing instead of just like fluff words. So cut 20%, because that's going to force you to really refine your narrative and make sure that you're talking about the things that are important and not just the things that you think are fun.
Yeah, absolutely.
And
Which I hate
so,
because
if we go...
the worst writer ever, and it is impossible for me to cut things. So I hate all of these things, but I know that they're truth.
So if we go all the way back to here, right, this one on the far right is my attempt to cut 20% out of this. A straw poll when I did it was universal, within my community at least, that this is a stronger entry. Because it, right? It makes it more active. It keeps everything a little bit, right, instead of saying in the 19th century, we actually get more precise. 1860 is when the expedition reached Angkor Wat.
Yeah, and
So,
you're still one word less than the first one, right? You're 149
exactly.
versus 150.
Yeah. So this is, I think, it's exactly 20% less than this one. And so it just forces you to make everything, like, transition words, conjunctions, are the bane of your existence. Even though, regardless of what your high school English teacher said about how you should use them, don't. Conjunctions are to be used as little as possible in public-facing, especially Codex writing. If it can be a simple, regular sentence, just do that instead.
Absolutely.
Boom. And then, the last tip here is link Codex entries to player actions more than to player observations. Right? So, this is if you... And make sure that they know that they did something that unlocked the thing. Right? Don't make it, you learned a tutorial thing, and then there's a little tiny pop in the corner that says, oh, you're just kind of wandering around, and it's like, surprise, here's a pop-up. It's like, what did I do?
Yeah.
No. Make it clear if you're...
That tea thing, for example, like, would be better at, which I know in the game there's like a whole challenge where you're supposed to get the teapots from people. Like, it would make more sense.
And you get to meet the guy who formalized the Japanese tea ceremony, Senorikyu.
Yeah.
The coolest guy on the planet. Yeah,
Exactly.
yeah.
It would make much more sense that maybe like in one of those many different challenges of going to go find the teapot, you stumble upon some guy who's working in the tea fields and he tells you something and he gives you a little bag of tea and then boop in
And
the
then you get a
corner.
pop-up.
Yeah. It would make
Yeah,
more sense
and
that
there
way.
you go.
Absolutely.
You met someone, you talked to someone, you had a little narrative moment, you unlocked an entry that tells you more. Or, you know, right, a really good example of what they do, you climbed a castle, now you get a codex entry about the castle,
Yeah, absolutely.
right? That's a thing they pretty consistently do. I really like that. I mean, it's a pain in the ass to climb these castles, but
Yes.
undeniably, this is a really effective example of it linking it to player action because you just accomplished something. You're on top of this landmark. Now, here's the thing. Now, observation can work. Sometimes that's necessary, but it's kind of a more whenever possible if it's to a player linked in with one of your player verbs and not the verb see.
Yeah.
That's going to be better.
I think it should be a reward. I think that's like another way to look at it is that you just did something good. Here's your reward. You get a little bit nugget of
Yeah,
information. Yeah, absolutely.
absolutely. And that can be, discover, right? Or a platforming challenge or something. That all counts. Uh, but yeah, just kind of, oh, I saw a thing that is otherwise unmemorable, and now I've unlocked a thing. It's kind of, the player is less likely to engage with that. Now, there's a really good example in the bottom end of the Three Shadows maps where it's about puppetry, but they have this one of the very few puppeteers actually on the street performing for a bunch of children. And so there is the codex becomes a way to draw attention to the activity in the world, not the other way around. And so that's justifiable, but it should just be a minority.
Absolutely.
All right. Fixing codexes, number 3. Execute the plan. The problem, you've written it. It looks really good. You've had really good production. Your style guide, no one's reading it yet. So some really practical, crunchy solutions. One, don't make your unlock too subtle. It doesn't have to be necessarily the big black box of Assassin's Creed, though I don't hate that either. But don't make it some little tiny little ding in the top corner, because, again, player attention is generally focused around the center of the screen, and if you're too far in the corner, especially on a larger screen, player will simply not see it, even if it's something they would like otherwise be engaging with. If you have a discoverable or an unlock codex, don't unlock multiple entries at the same time.
Yeah.
If you unlock 4 things at once, then it's like, whoa, 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 whoa.
Stop, please.
Let it breathe.
Yeah.
Don't make an unlock in a context where the player's attention is going to be occupied. Like, if it popped up Tokugawa Ieyasu in the middle of the cutscene,
battle,
where it shows up, right? Oh, exactly. Hi, yes, I walked within 25 meters of Tokugawa Ieyasu while fighting somebody, and it pops up, and it's like, then I take damage, and then I'm mad at the codex. But then I'm not engaged with it. Then I'm mad at it for distracting me.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Make sure your contents are actually relevant to your setting. This happens with shocking frequency, where a codex entry will bounce off like 500 years previously. Don't do that!
No.
Make sure it's a corollary to making sure that this engages with player action, is make sure your codex entry is very contemporary to the setting, and that the player can trust they're learning about the setting they chose to play in when they're clicking on it. Because once you have that trust, it's easier to get people to continue to engage.
Absolutely.
And then, make sure we're evaluating after we launch, are we actually targeting the audience that we expected to? How are we measuring that? Game studios collect scads of audience data. Actually do that data analysis to see if your codex, structurally and content-wise, is being read, and if it's being read by players whose behavior you otherwise expect to be really resonant and engaged with codexes. If it's not, do some evaluation, do some ideation, and patch it to continue to iterate and improve this as we're going. Congratulations to Shadows for doing this.
True.
Like, recognizing that there's a player behavioral need that your codex is not meeting and just making players frustrated, and then adding your entry in, even though it was almost certainly in production before the game launched, still recognizing that as a need and correcting that post-launch is good.
Mm-hmm.
And that brings us to the end, right? These are very high level. I think it's a lot of codexes are, I'm going to be honest, are like 80% way to being good.
Mm-hmm.
But it's taking those next steps to really formalize this, because we've proven audiences really care, and game studios are investing really heavily. I mean, the team at Relic for Age of Empires 4 partnered with Arizona State to make a college credit out of the Age of Empires 4 campaigns with paratext material on their website.
Yeah.
Game devs and publishers are already committed to the idea that codexes can, or that video games can and should be classroom and public educational tools in addition to entertaining immersive experiences. So we need to really commit to that and bring the standard of the writing and the design and the mode of interaction of codexes up to the level of cultural heritage institutions that have been doing this sort of public education for a really, really long time. So I hope this talk gave some really initial steps and justified sort of that as a valuable thing. And yeah, thank you all so much for the attention.
Applause. Oh, that didn't work. I have a sound alert that didn't work. There was applause for yes.
Yay.
Thank you so much, Ludo. And I will say, I half the time, some of these time, do work with a group called SASA. Which they actually
I've worked with them too. Yeah.
I've worked with them too. I don't do as much with. They have so many different smaller internal departments, and I have only done their live. I'm trying to shout them out right now. Save Engine Studies. Yeah, that's it.
There we go.
I have done their live streams and been like a guest expert on there, but they do have a separate department which is actually run by a friend that I went to grad school with, which is using video games to make modules to give them.
I was the consultant for their Viking Age history module, and
Amazing.
I recommended the person who was their Irish folklore and culture consultant for that project.
So there are already groups that are doing this and actually rather than, I will say there is a small, obviously niche group of smaller indie games that are literally meant to be played in schools and are history based games that so you stumble upon them and you're suddenly why is this sponsored by a college, and then you suddenly realize, oh, it was literally made to do this.
I highly recommend those games, by the way, because some of them are actually incredibly good.
I know,
games,
exactly. They're great.
To other stuff.
Not looking down at them at all, but you suddenly realize that there are some that are just actually made for that. But there are people who are actively trying to take these games that already have so much information in them and adapt them and create different sort of modules for schools and for a variety of ages and such. So
and there's some really, really brilliant people working from the academic side of things to do the same thing. So I'd recommend checking out Jeremiah McCall and his work for a framework for actually analyzing games within school contexts. And folks like Robert Hodden, who are really doing cool work on using games practically in college level classes, both game design and game analysis. Also Jill Berkey, who has run a course a couple of years now that I gave some advice on, that's really really looks like it's coming into its own for medieval history. So lots of folks working in that space, lots of folks doing really cool stuff. I will say, my focus is very much outside of the university, because I think classrooms have really useful work, but also classrooms in many ways are doing their own thing.
Yeah.
And so leaning in too hard on classrooms and college level education especially
Mm-hmm.
actually is a bit of a pitfall, because the things that work in a classroom setting when there's a lot of expert intervention and guidance
Mm-hmm.
really don't work as well within a broader popular discursive
Very true.
loop. And so finding ways to intercept that discourse and more helpfully route people into more nuanced, more educational discourse environments
Mm-hmm.
without needing to break all the way out into classroom settings is a
Mm-hmm.
really unsolved problem.
Yeah. Very, very true.
This is one way of doing it. There's lots of really
Mm-hmm.
talented YouTube channels. Samantha Rochefort at Polygon, he's like before Polygon exploded, rest in peace Polygon,
Mm-hmm.
um, of last week. But right, I've cited Samantha Rochefort's Assassin's Creed Unity
Mm-hmm.
video and why no, Ubisoft did not actually uh, uh, provide plans to rebuild Notre Dame.
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah.
I've cited that in academic publications as a really good example of kind of intercepting
Mm-hmm.
discourse environments around games to do more public educational work.
Absolutely.
So,
So, and if anybody has any questions for Ludo, and any of the different stuff that we talked about today, please put them in the chat. My one big question is, we were sort of, when we were talking about like this upcoming lecture, we kind of got into a tangent, I think that was maybe earlier this week. And my question for you is, where do you see the discovery tours of Assassin's Creed Origins and Assassin's Creed Odyssey in comparison to all the other codexes, especially in comparison to a lot of the ones that Assassin's Creed did? Because I have a lot of opinions about it that I didn't really realize until I started
yeah.
preemptively thinking about what we were going to talk about today, and I suddenly was like, oh, wait a second, okay, I have thoughts about this now. And I would love to hear
Yeah.
your thoughts first about the differences, and are they the same? Are they good? Are they bad? Anything like that.
It's so tough. Discovery tours are a really unusual beast, because we really have had three iterations of the Discovery Tour that have very little to do with each other.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So, we've got the Origins and Odyssey Discovery Tour,
Yeah.
which are literally tours.
Yeah.
Like, they really lean into the tour aspect. We've eliminated all the enemies. We are doing a walking tour that is a combination of narration, text, and concept art visualization, especially, as ways of understanding this. It's real, like, that's super interesting. That is its own dedicated mode.
Yeah.
Like, so, like, that's kind of, it's not a codex because it's not integrated into the play experience, even though you do play it. But it's its own silent entity.
Yeah, exactly. And I
thought it's
yeah.
So tricky, and that makes it really, really neat. So like the individual entries in them are kind of codexes, but the mode as a whole operates in a really peculiar spot where it's not kind of something that you reference during regular play.
It's also
hard. You literally stop regular play and go do.
We were talking about this, and I was like, it always annoyed me because, to be honest, I like when we started streaming, that was one of the first streams we actually did, was because I had never played a game like this. I decided to start with discovery tours, and then we would jump into actually figuring out like what gameplay is. And the weird thing I discovered was that there are some really good tours that are really interesting, and then there are some tours that don't really make any sense and are just kind of, I don't know, unrelated, kind of weird. And there is a lot missing, which is the big thing that I kind of noticed. But at the same sense, I'm also missing that codex. Now that I have because again, that was Assassin's Creed. For those who don't know, it was, the Origins was the first of the Assassin's Creed games I played, and so it was literally like, I had no context. I had no reference to what a codex was. And now
Sure.
I've played Odyssey, I've played Mirage, I've played Shadows, I've gone back and I've played 1 and 2. So now I have a little bit more context. And so I'm suddenly realizing that I missed out. Like, we kind of missed out with Origins because, remind me if I'm wrong, I don't think there is a normal codex in the actual game.
No, there's not.
No, there's not. And that's unfortunate because one of my biggest critiques with the game in general is that I'm not very satisfied with the time setting of when they did the game. It makes sense and I completely understand it, and I am usually one that,
I mean, Ptolemaic Egypt is kind of a nothing burger of a time for ancient Egypt TM.
What essentially I came up with is like, I'm usually one person that I'm like, I understand why game devs do what they do, because I understand that we are sort of not like we're not their cup of tea, because we critique them and we get all like personal, and so like they're gonna use something that is gonna become easy. So in their case, Ptolemaic Egypt is really easy because the Romans automatically become the enemy, and in some cases the actual like Ptolemaic pharaohs. But it kind of is like weird and like sort of funny how a lot of people will say something, oh, the ancient Egyptians invented this, and then when you look at that, you suddenly say, wait a second, this was only introduced to Egypt in the Ptolemaic era. That doesn't mean the ancient Egyptians invented it. And so I get, that's like a more personal pet peeve of mine. And so the choice of the Ptolemaic Empire as the setting, it's a very interesting time period, and it's got a lovely little mixture of I call it literally the I don't know what's it called, the mixing bowl of this era. But is it really like ancient Egypt? Is it the best time period that we could have represented this like ancient culture? No. And so I think we missed out a lot because they still show those really old historic structures like the pyramids and temples and stuff, but it doesn't really like give what we want, what I'm really wanting out of teaching people about ancient Egypt.
Agreed.
Alex, do what you need to do. Alex is my mom.
Yep. Phenomenal.
But yeah, so back to Discovery Tours. Like, I feel like I have been robbed. I feel like I'm looking back and I've been robbed from an amazing an amazing codex that could have told me about other historical characters. Because to be honest, the bigger one that I needed it for was Odyssey.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh my god.
And that's kind of been the huge restriction of that format of Discovery Tour. Right, and that's only type 1, like iteration 1.
Yes.
Valhalla stands on its own as a really very different take on the Discovery Tour.
I don't know how the Discovery Tours work for that one.
So instead of having these walking tours, they actually have like 8 chapters that actually follow like 2 different characters having and there is a quest. It's a totally separate story through the entire life of the one hand a Christian monk, and on the other hand a Norwegian merchant who moves to Jorvik.
Huh. Okay.
And so follows those 2 characters across 8 different, and then has one chapter where you play as Alfred, just to wander around Winchester, talk about Guthrum's baptism in 874. 74. And well, as Viking Age, I should know my dates on that one in particular.
I do not care. That's amazing.
I have a master's degree in Vikings. I should really know those dates.
No, I don't know any ancient Egyptian years at all.
Iconic. I love that.
At all. I have a cheat sheet that's over here that gives me the basics in case anybody asks me.
Perfect. Right, that one
okay
has some really interesting stuff. Takes a lot more quest-based things, and often will actually stop and just ask you, like, give you a quiz, which is
Oh,
kind of weird.
I don't want.
But then
I don't know if I want to be tested in a video game.
I don't know if I really want to have a quiz in my video games
No.
around what herbs should I be using to make a medicine to break fever.
Those are the worst because that has happened. Like there are some Assassin's Creed games where we've played where they're like there was one in Shadows. There was you had to remember which way, how deep you bowed, and which way to put it around it. And I was like, and luckily somebody told me that I needed to know, and so I wrote it down on a post-it note because Melissa sometimes reads really fast and does not remember those things. So
I played in canon mode, which means dialogue options are fake and minigames don't exist.
Got it. Yeah, I am not playing in canon mode, and so those sometimes that has kicked me in the butt where I'm sitting there and I'm like, I should have known these things, and,
yeah.
This was the biggest difference of me going from Assassin's Creed Origins to Odyssey, and Odyssey took me a long time to figure out how to mitigate these choices that I now had, because Origins there were no choices. Everything just happened the way it was supposed to happen. And Odyssey they introduced the choices.
Yeah.
And I essentially like it became very hard for me to like figure it out. So it took like everyone in the chat probably knows, it took me like 20 minutes to contemplate if I was going to kill somebody very early on in the game. And I essentially came up with what would Cassandra do, and I very much formed her character in my mind like I was playing an RPG game, and said, okay, well, this is how her childhood turned out, this is what her personality is, these are the choices that she's going to make, because otherwise it would have just sent me to the moon to have to make a choice every single time. Because I couldn't make those personal choices, because I cannot relate to Cassandra, because she has a crazy history and such.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
So, yeah, so, right, Valhalla's Discovery Tour, though, right, following the same thing, though, with this being a completely siloed thing, all the entries look basically identical to how they look in Mirage and Shadows.
Okay.
So, that's where that style actually originates from, is in Valhalla, which is an innovation from Odyssey, and I think generally a positive innovation from Odyssey.
I would agree.
But the trying to make this an actual narrative game mode, like its own mini educational game within the game that could be provided separately, means that they're suddenly subject to all of the problems of narrative and quest design.
Yeah.
And trying to make interesting, narrative challenges and conflict that actually drives character action means they get a lot of stuff factually wrong. Like, there's more stuff factually wrong in Valhalla's Discovery Tour than there is in Origins or Odysseys.
Interesting. Okay.
And sometimes really badly historically wrong.
It's not great. Not great.
So that's a case, right? That's a case where, because it's so quest-driven, so narrative, like, the four ways of understanding some of the player types still apply, but the lessons you take away are just so much different. And it's a case where worrying about content and making sure that you're not just lying to your players by having people do things that are not just historically dubious, but historically extremely well tested as a thing that will get you into trouble if you did, and phrasing this as the historically correct solution to a problem.
Yeah.
It's like, well, you're now just spreading misinformation.
Yeah. Yeah.
This isn't well-intentioned, you made some errors. This is just your quest design has walked you straight into spreading misinformation and doing things that need to be done in very specific context, in the wrong context, in the wrong way, and getting yourself into huge amounts of trouble about it.
Yeah, absolutely.
It sucks real bad. And there's some cases where, like, I reached out to friends who had doctorates in Old Norse religion. I was like, have you ever heard of this? And they're like, nah.
Yeah.
So, that's a part where I really care about context, because sometimes the people they got wrote really, really, really good stuff, and some of the entries are phenomenal, but Valhalla's Discovery Tour is so uneven
Yeah.
that it starts really causing problems. And then the third iteration of the Discovery Tour is, of course, Mirage and Shadows, where we're back to just having Codex entries,
Yeah.
right? Where
Which,
two, three, four, I guess,
yeah.
have this very meta Codex, right? Where
Yes.
you're having Sean and Rebecca and the stereo people all commenting on it,
Hmm.
being like, haha, look, this is what history tells us, but haha, we know better. Um, Unity and Syndicate seem to have absolutely, as far as I know, have absolutely nothing.
Hmm. Yeah.
Then we get the Discovery Tours, and now we're just back to having a more separated historical discoverable codex, which I think is the correct play.
Yeah. I really wish, because there are lots of things that I do like about the Discovery Tours, but I see it as a different game.
It's a different game.
Especially because you literally have to exit the game to go into it, rather than there being a mode where you just go into the corner and you hold the X and suddenly you're in discovery mode or something. Like,
Exactly.
because you have to actually fully exit to it, I think I wish that it had a codex, and then the discovery tour was, because when I saw it, and when I saw this game getting released and I saw them talking about the discovery tour, my first thing was I thought that they were releasing this discovery tour purely for like putting in schools and like that education aspect of it. But I didn't think that like there would be not enough stuff actually included in the actual game. And then my other big thing is that I love the discovery tours, but I'm pissed off that they didn't do a discovery tour for the DLCs. Because the
Yeah.
only place that I really want to go in the discovery tours is there are plenty of places like in Thebes that I want to go to. The major place I want to go to is I wanted to walk around Hatshepsut's temple. And
Absolutely.
I've done it where we've played games and we have to go there, and essentially I just send up my freaking eagle and we just walk back and forth like slowly but surely, and me trying to focus
Sure.
on things, because I have yet to like decide I'm gonna go kill every single Roman soldier in here so we can finally walk around and see everything.
Yeah.
And
Absolutely.
it made me
Yeah.
really mad because I was like, why, like, it doesn't have to be a discovery tour. Why is there not just a we're safe mode? I don't have to worry about mean people. Like, I would rather have taken that just to be able to like wander around the places that, especially when they make the temples, and this is the same thing with Odyssey, especially when they make certain temples like literally forts for the evil people, and I'm like, come on people, I want to walk, I
Yeah.
want to look
Yeah, no,
around.
I mean, they do it. They do it in all of the games, right?
Yeah.
So, right, most of these shrines and temples that you're actually going to see in Shadows are real places that are laid out almost exactly how they are
Yeah.
in the game. But like half of them are full of baddies. It's like, come on, guys.
Yeah.
And same thing in Valhalla, right? There's a massive enemy camp that's in the Mithraeum in in London.
Mm,
And the Mithraeum is such a cool site,
yeah.
such a phenomenally cool site.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, I don't want to have to stab a bunch of people to go talk about that. Also, yeah, in Shadows, it's really funny because spilling blood inside a Shinto shrine or a Shugendo shrine is like a huge no-no. Like, ritual purity is an enormous big deal.
Yeah.
And yeah, there's like 6 of them that I can think of off the top of my head where you have to, both for main quest
Full
and for
martyr.
just clearing random stuff, you have to go stab a bunch of people. It's like,
Yeah.
ooh, ooh.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, yes, did that happen? Yes. This is a game that says if you climb, like, we
I
will
was just gonna
punish you
say
if you climb on
the arches.
yeah,
I can't remember thinking the name of it, but yeah,
Tori. That's the word, Tori.
yeah, Tori.
Uh,
I
the
was
game
just gonna
punishes
say
you
that.
if you climb on those.
I haven't
But
tried, but
also,
I'm too
you have to
scared.
stab people inside.
I literally was about to say that. I was like, they gave me a warning when I did that, and I was like, I haven't tried it yet because I'm scared of what's gonna happen. Like,
Yeah. So we're like that.
yeah,
There's odd contradictions in practice in all implementations, but yeah, no, I do have strong feelings on the use of replicated historical sites
mm-hmm.
that audiences know as landmarks
Yeah,
and want to walk around in, and then stuffing them full of enemies.
yeah, and or like the Great Pyramid of Giza, which has been lovingly mapped beautifully by so many people, and then adding a big giant hole in the bottom and a huge
Oh
secret
yeah.
chamber pouring with gold coins, which the Egyptians
See
didn't
all.
have.
See also Indiana Jones.
Yes. Oh God, yeah,
So
yeah, yeah. I know.
that's a classic of the genre.
I know, and there are certain, again, there are things when I really look at like Origins as like a whole, there are very little critiques that I have with it. But like I it sounds kind of crazy. I would rather them make up a completely new site and put a secret chamber and booby traps. I would rather them make up an entire site than put all of that and change the interior of an actually known site, especially a known site that is full of so many conspiracy theories about secret chambers.
Yeah, well, Assassin's Creed and feeding into conspiracy theories. Name a more iconic duo.
I know, man. Oh my god. But yeah,
So,
any other questions for Ludo? Hey, the hole in the Sphinx butt is sort of there. It's just not a full hole in the Sphinx butt that turns into a giant tunnel that turns into a giant temple where you connect things to the stars. But it is in the. I do admire that they put it in the exact location of an actual, what was probably a looter's tunnel, thinking that there was something underneath, so they kept on digging and then found nothing. And I do admire that they put it in the same spot. But it is not a whole hole, as Alex says.
that is very good, though.
Yeah.
I do kind of enjoy that.
Yeah, little things.
Yeah.
But yeah, this was absolutely amazing. I have now learned so many more things about codexes than I ever thought I would ever know. And I'm definitely now going to be looking at codexes a little bit more critically. And I'm just so mad. I'm so mad that we don't really have one for Origins, because I really wish we had something that gate, because as it is, it's the biggest major Egyptian like video game that I would say that is solely focused on Egypt, because I know it's included in a lot of Civilization and a lot of those types of games, but it's just like.
But it is certainly the most lavishly rendered rendition of
Absolutely.
any time in well, any point in Egyptian history period, I'd say.
Period.
But especially certainly before the modern era.
Absolutely.
But yeah, right. And unfortunately, right, I mean, yes, we talk about Assassin's Creed a lot, because if you put two people who play historical games in a room, we're talking either about Paradox or about Assassin's Creed, depending on which type of history gamer you are.
Yes.
We are both Assassin's Creed history gamers and not Paradox Interactive history gamers. So,
and I am not a city builder, or a one of like Total War Pharaoh. I am literally like, everyone has seen me rage quit Pharaoh: A New Era, so we don't touch those things. Even though the only reason I honestly kept playing that game is because I loved the intros to every single level that went into very like detailed of like, you are now the vassal of Djoser, and like all of this amazing stuff. I've never heard of a Paradox game, and I'm kind of scared because this sounds like
Imperial Rome, Crusader Kings, Europa Universalis, Hearts of Iron.
Oh, okay. I have heard of Europa. Yeah.
Yeah.
Not my type of game, unfortunately. Never gonna get me to play. That's why I do a lot of the Sassa streams that I'm a guest star I've only done Total War Pharaoh, because I'm like, I don't want to play Total War Pharaoh, but I'll watch you guys play Total War Pharaoh and we'll talk about something else.
So, yeah. Right. There's a lot of fun codexes out there, and there's a lot of games that are doing really exciting, interesting stuff. We talked about Pentiment a couple of times, but like, we're starting to see Pentiment's influence on the games, like especially indie historical game space, and that's really fun. And I'm expecting to see some really fun stuff. But there's a really good example of how to do a tooltip UI in a way that is really interesting and really compelling. definitely check that one out. Because it's all inside like it's marginalia scribbles in a manuscript, and the manuscript
Ooh.
is the game. But the
Yeah.
game is an illumination within a manuscript
I'm looking
that is
up
also a
this.
bad object in the game.
I'm pretty sure I
I
know what this game is, but I'm looking up something that I can see what it looks like because I'm pretty sure I know what it is. Yes, okay, this is the one I know. Yeah, this
Yep,
is the I was thinking
yep.
of.
It's
It looks
very
so
good.
cool.
It is one of very few games where it was like it has a bibliography, and so you can actually trace
Oh,
specific names.
wow.
And where the team not only was interested in really engaging with people doing the history stuff, but were actually thrilled when I was pulling up JSTOR to rebut some of their interpretations.
Wow, I love
So
it.
I love that whole team. They did such amazing work, and we're starting to see more stuff
Mhm.
like that. And so I expect we're seeing more and more interestingly integrated codexes in the next few years.
Yeah.
So I guess my big takeaway is like if you haven't been game dev watching this, get creative and think about it early so that you don't have to crunch it,
Mhm.
and that you can really focus on trying to strategically educate people.
Yeah.
But also, I'm so excited. I'm so excited to see these continue to improve because I think we are seeing a trend in the right direction. I just want to push it to get there faster.
Yeah, please, please. I want it faster. All right. Any last questions for Ludo? This was amazing. I'm like, I love that you came up with all the types of museum goers and types of video gamers and
Well,
combine it. Like that was so good.
the
I did
the,
not
mo-
expect that.
the moment I decided on this, I do not do it by halves, and I was literally just at a conference that was really focusing on some of these questions like 2.5 weeks
I
ago.
love that.
So it was like this is where my brain is at for my day job, and if you thought I wasn't going to apply that to my hobby, congratulations. Hello, my name's Adam, but you've never met me before.
Absolutely. Yes, we should be hiring Ludo to consult on codexes and such because I think it's a very wise thing. I think now that there are quite a few history themed and science communication themed streamers out there, like I think it is absolutely a because if you're gonna hit a hobbyist that is also a communicator out to the public because that is going to be like the perfect combination of a person who like plays these videos, sees these video games, but also talks to people constantly about these video games and can get
Exactly.
that other insight into it.
I mean, very, very true, especially on your marketing, is like, hi, yes, I will always happily. If you're doing something interesting, I want to make sure people know about it.
Yeah,
So please do interesting things and please get in touch. My
absolutely.
contact info is all right there. If you have follow ups, send me a message on kind of platform of choice. So,
Yeah, absolutely. And it's there was something I saw on LinkedIn that was somebody was looking for an Egyptology consultant about I think it was a card game or something, and I have never sent an email
nice.
faster, and I never heard anything back, which was very disappointing because I really
Dang.
wanted to. I was like, "Come
Yeah.
on, please hire me, hire me."
No, no.
It was
There's a couple projects coming down the pipeline that I am pretty darn excited about, but are a ways out yet. Some ones that I recommended some folks for that are still under wraps, but like there's some fun stuff happening and some really creative historical games in the pipeline. So
we love it. Absolutely amazing. All right. Well, thank you, Ludo, so much. Everyone, go and check out Ludo History and all of the amazing games that he plays, which I know half of you guys are in the chat because of Ludo. So
but
this is more
the
to
the
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 other
other
people.
the other half also make sure you've done the other and go check out Melissa because more history folks doing more history things and
Absolutely.
hanging out having a good time is very good.
It's very good. And for anybody who like came in at the last second or only came in for just a little bit, this will go on YouTube. I've been getting a little bit quicker about putting things on YouTube. It is the
Hey,
whole
that's better
VOD.
than I'm doing.
I do not edit them down. I just chop out the front and then chop out the end. So we don't get fancy in here. But they will be going up to YouTube.
I've not even accomplished that much in over a year, but I have them, most of the things saved. Certainly all recent stuff on my channel is saved, and will be going up next week as when I'm going to upload a bunch of that stuff and then drip feed it out over June. So
Oh yeah.
there will be stuff over there. So yeah.